Leor,
John,
what's up, dude?
¿qué pasó?
Dude, a lot has happened.
A lot.
A lot. Since you've been sitting in this chair. It's obviously not the same chair, but metaphorically speaking.
Different chair, different plants.
All different things.
Yeah,
Different law firm.
very.
Okay, that's like really, really exciting. I knew that this was something that like has been on your mind for a long time, and I think you had the confidence to do it, which is I think the hardest part is actually like having the confidence and courage to take that step. So congratulations. Do you want to tell everybody about like the move you made and how that's been going?
Absolutely. It's I've worked at a few law firms out of law school, and it's been a great journey. I learned a lot. I have nothing but good things to say about my colleagues, my bosses, but one of the troubling trends that I saw was the attorney caseloads just have continued to rise, and I'm hearing this largely across the board. And you can't continue to provide the same level of quality when your caseload is just too large.
Can I interject really quick with a question? Is that due to an increased amount of claims or not enough attorneys? If that's across like multiple law firms, like what would be the issue there?
No, I think it's a combination. I do think it's industry wide because I'm also hearing a lot from claims adjusters, same problem. There's different insurance companies have different parameters on how many claims they feel like their adjuster should be handling. But frankly, when I am looking to work with a client, that's something that I'm looking for on the other end as well. It's just what are people's caseloads like?
Sure.
And the reason for
like from
that,
an adjuster standpoint?
Yeah, from the adjuster, exactly.
How many claims what that looks like across like the spectrum of like people with the most caseload to the absolute like least?
Absolutely. Without dropping names, I would say the top end is in the 170s to even up to 200.
That's a lot.
And I can't imagine that's really manageable, frankly.
For sure.
The lowest I've heard is I think around the 120s.
Okay.
And I can just tell you from experience that the adjusters and the clients that I have that are ranging toward the 120, we are closing their claims way faster than the clients where it's the opposite. Because on the one side, when you just have too many files and too much going on, you're putting out fires and you're playing defense. And when you have a lower caseload, when you have a lower case count, you're way more in the driver's seat. You can kind of take a second. You're constantly assessing. You can see what things need to be done. You have times for strategy sessions, whereas otherwise you're just constantly on the back foot.
So proactive versus reactive.
Exactly. But
that's a big deal. So you don't even work with all the insurance companies either. So
no.
I like you don't work with State Fund.
Thankfully, only State Fund does because nobody should be working with
their
them.
Adjusters are like it's kind of unreasonable. They don't do a bad job either. They're not like out of all the insurance carriers we work with.
Yeah,
State Fund does have the largest caseload, but they're not the worst at all. I won't name names either, but it's interesting you say even from like 120 to 180, the difference between those outcomes for the client.
Yeah.
That's kind of crazy. And then for your side of things, so you saw the trend of like, hey, these caseloads are becoming unmanageable. This is now, the fires that our adjusters are putting out like are now heaped on you. And so that transition in your mind, how could this be done better? I mean, is it just managing caseloads, or what's the difference that like you feel like EM Legal is going to be able to provide like for your clients?
Yeah. Well, I can actually bookend that into, your first question. And the trend I see is claims are on the rise. You look at the DIR stats, you look across, California, claims are definitely rising. And now that we're starting to head into a recession, if layoffs are coming in, that's only going to continue to increase. There's also
that's litigation too. So like that's not just claims as well. So those are litigated claims typically on layoffs.
Yeah, and during bad times, the litigated claims go up way more because when people are working, then you're more likely to have unlitigated claims because the person wants to keep their job, they're happy. Generally, employees don't litigate their claims, but when somebody gets fired, they run to get an attorney. So But the other side of this is also, I feel like there's kind of what I'm going to call legacy litigation tactics. And there's a lot of legacy law firms, and there's a lot of legacy insurance companies. And they've been kind of handling things the old school way. And they're just not seeing the same results. So what ends up happening is you have some of these firms, that I've worked at that are very good at what they do. You have some of these insurance companies that are growing, and they're growing, for good reason. It's because they're very good at what they do. But they end up becoming prisoners of their own success.
So like old modeling in a new field or a new territory, right?
It's more like the industry right now, I do feel, because I don't have, 20, 30 years of experience, but I have been doing this job for almost 10 years. And even I've seen that, there are certain insurance companies that are growing way faster than others. But the ones that are having problems are the ones that aren't properly managing their growth. And the same thing that applies with the law firm. So you asked earlier, like, why are case files, why are counts going higher? It's because there are some people that are being sure to direct their growth properly. And if that means maybe, taking on a little less business if necessary, or being sure that hiring is able to keep up, great. But the ones that aren't able to do that, they go, oh yeah, let's accept everything now, and then we'll deal with how to actually execute on the back end later. And
Sure.
I don't believe in that mentality. So you asked about some of these law firms, the case counts continue to rise because they can't hire fast enough, but they're providing a quality product, and more people want that product. But when that occurs, something's got to give. So in my opinion, what has to give is you have to then become more selective with your clients if you're not in a position to, grow sustainably. So part of the reason, once again, why I made EM legal is, it kind of reminds me of when I was a kid. When you're a child, all you do is you judge your parents. You judge your parents left and right all day long. You go, I wouldn't do this. You're doing this wrong. You're screwing me over like this. I can't believe you're making this decision. What do you mean I can't stay out till midnight and I'm only 12? Are you in,
Yeah, be reasonable here, Dad.
What do you mean I can't have $500 and I'm only 8? Like, I need presents. Are you insane? So you build this list in your head of all the things that you're going to do differently. At the end of the day, once you become a parent, that's when you start to learn, these are the things where I was right about. You know what? This can be done differently. This can be done better. And there's a whole host of things where you go, okay, this is, these are the challenges. And this is the best way to do it.
Yeah, it was very ironic you said that, because that's my next question is like, now that like you and Sean are footing the bill for everything.
Exactly.
Right? That is a completely different story when it comes to managing cash flows and when it comes to managing cases and like, hey, we need more money in the door. So like, let's go off this cliff and build the plane on the way down,
Yeah.
And that, it's a balancing act. And I think there is something to that. So it's going before you're ready, like taking on more and building and that's how we built our business. And so we built it in the parameters of making sure that and it's not happened every time. Like a lot of times, probably 3 times in our 8 years, we've overworked our staff, like substantially. Not because we were being malicious and greedy, but because we understand that like the time in which we book a deal, the time we get paid can be upwards of a year. And so we'll take on this account and it takes so much time for us to actually recoup the money that we've invested in it that like, unfortunately from cash flow perspective, like, hey, we can't hire right now. So it's something that like we are very aware of now, and we're going to make sure that we don't get in that spot. So it's like finding that it's riding the wave. Like you got to find the perfect angle and make sure that you are mapping your expenses and your cash flow, like, or your income, like very, very well. So I feel like for you, managing the caseloads is going to be like, that's paramount.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've been working together for, a few years already.
Yep.
And, also one of the things that I feel sets your organization apart is I also work very closely with your employees. So when you were in those scenarios, you'd be telling me that you're aware of the fact that your employees are overworked, and many places where they go, hey, you know what? Things are kind of working. Like, yeah, sure, people are a little stressed. Yeah, sure. But like, I don't know, maybe we can make this the new normal. Yeah. As opposed to, hey, this is a short transitionary period. There has to be a little bit of push and pull, but don't worry, we have plans. Exactly. So that's, it is a different mentality. So, to continue to bookend the insurers and the employers and the law firms that are providing a quality product, that keep quality as the absolute paramount goal, instead of, for lack of a better term, but maybe allowing greed somewhat to, affect that original vision. I feel like they're the ones who are suffering right now, because there's been this drive to, hey, things can be done a better way. And then you start to have success and you start to grow and you grow and you grow. But if you lose that original vision of, hey, quality over everything, then things are going to start suffering. Your employees are going to start suffering. The workload is just going to continue to increase. And then you're playing this, you're kind of playing this game of chicken of, well, let's see where the breaking point is.
Yeah.
And we're going to wait till, the nuts start falling off of the wheels before we start correcting, as opposed to
so the brakes fall off. I get that. And there's merit to that too, because everybody has a different stress tolerance. Like every individual person, like some people do better under stress. We have a lot of folks at our company that like were in positions that were entry level that like didn't challenge them enough, and they wanted more, more stuff. And so like that kind of stuff is like, all right, well, you want more. Like obviously like income comes with that as well, but it's even just someone's day to day is you have one person in the same role as someone else, and like they're handling stress completely different, and their work product is very different.
Yeah.
And so it's gonna be fun to watch you and Sean grow this thing. I'm excited.
It's the last thing I'll say about the firm before we turn is just also another reason why I'm very excited is because I want to incentivize excellence. There are some places where I feel like excellence is expected, but it's not properly rewarded. So you have you have those people, like you said, the ones that want the challenge. They want to rise to the occasion. They want more responsibility. You go, here's all the responsibility you could ever want for 10% more pay. It's like, are you crazy? You have to incentivize your star players. For sure. So, that's something I'm very excited to do is, to be sure that the people that want to give, that they will receive.
That's really cool.
And once again, if you're in the driver's seat, then you get to decide. And last but not least, just like any parent, now that I am a parent of a 3-year-old, I'm going to find out some of the things, maybe I wanted to do that you can't.
Yeah.
But I'm going to be pushing to see exactly how much, I can provide. And like you've actually said this to me about Whiteboard, but you said that, you're not just building a company, you're building a family. And that's something that I've really taken to heart. And, right now it's just Sean and I, and we just hired our first assistant.
That's awesome, dude.
We've been paying her, and Sean and I will finally take our first reimbursement of initial capital. We haven't even paid ourselves technically, but we're going to start taking some money out pretty soon.
That's really cool.
But kind of what you said.
How long did that take you?
It took us 2.5 months.
That's sweet. That's really good. It took us like 5 times longer than that. So you guys are off to a good start then. That's amazing.
I can, with, you put us in touch with Foresight, who is, a fantastic client. We're doing work with LWP and Broadspire. We're doing work with Omaha. We're doing work with Travelers, with Athens. We got a few more clients coming in, but we're going to be looking to hire. Actually, exactly what you said. We're in a position where we need to hire, but we don't even have the cash flow for it.
Hilarious.
So as a result, but when I'm talking to my clients, I'm telling them like, hey, actually, I have room for these files, but some people would think this is crazy, but I've actually told clients like, hey, can you give me a month? I'm wrapping up some cases. I have a couple IFRs pending. I got some things cooking, but I want to be sure that if something comes in the door, it will be handled.
That's really
so
cool.
That's something Sean and I that we basically agreed on is we will never overpromise and underdeliver. It will always be the reverse.
Super cool.
Yeah.
That's really neat, man. I think a cool part about you going from working someone for you guys working to yourselves is you guys are always going to be that backstop. So, right. So if it's a cash flow issue, like you guys know you can put more into the machine, like you too. And I think that's very valuable to have like 2 relatively young dudes coming out here and like having all the energy to go start like a rad law firm. I think it's beautiful, man. Really good job.
Thanks, Sean.
Where do you think the industry's going? I mean, obviously we're in a recession right now. It doesn't look like that's going to stop at all. Inflation is It doesn't seem to be transitory. And I feel like those like complementing issues are going to cause a massive increase in the cost of claims from a medical perspective, but also like increase in litigation. So I'm wondering, are there any like tools that law firms are using to help like triage different injuries to say, hey, this one is, we need to settle this one early. This one makes sense to fight. And part of the issue is, especially because you have to get the green light from all the adjusters, say, hey, like you have authorization to settle between here and here. We'd like to see some money back. And then also like for those that, do you ever push back and say, hey, we have a slam dunk case somewhere and be like, hey, we want to fight this one? Or is it always like up to the adjuster to kind of tell you what to do?
It definitely depends on the client. So there's some clients that truly, like there are clients that will do 90% of what I say. And I feel like that's a pretty decent ratio. Like no client should ever do 100% of what anybody tells them.
For sure.
It's like, hey, sometimes I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Rarely. But, but at the same time, then there are some clients where I'm telling them like, hey, these are our options. And, definitely, this firm prides itself on this idea of options because, to quote Rick and Morty,
Perfect.
Science is more art than science. That was something that Rick Sanchez said.
That's awesome.
And, the same thing applies to litigation. Litigation is very much an art form, and every single case is different. Now, that's not to say that, there aren't certain patterns that they fall into, but largely you do need to create a tailored approach for each case. Now, having said that, there's certainly some rubrics that you can kind of follow. And the general one is yes. And the only good case is a closed one. And the best time to do that is early. So does that create a system that maybe incentivizes, additional filings at an employer? Like it may, and that's something that should not be discounted. But the problem that we continue to face is the law is how it is written. And we can't rewrite the law. Sean and I, when we go down to the board, we're arguing with what we have. We can't, we can't make things up as we go. So in that scenario, to actually take a Buddhist approach to this, it's tend to the part of the garden that you can touch. So that's not to, Sean and I, we definitely, we're trying to get involved, some of the more legislative aspects and, get more active in fixing the law. But in the meantime, the law is how it is. So to answer your question about what we can do going into a recession, how we can be more proactive. One of the things that employers should definitely be doing is documentation. I can't stress that enough. If you can't prove it in court, then it never happened. If it's merely something that you told somebody, well, just know that the other person is going to get up on the stand and they're going to say the opposite. And in the law, it's essentially written in where tie goes to the runner, in this case, the injured worker. So if you have an employer, for example, LA Apparel, one of my favorite clients, thanks to your help, and they have Maggie, who is a nurse triage, and she is on site every single day. When I have an applicant in a deposition tell me, well, I didn't know how to file a claim, I'm like, well, do you know who Maggie is? Now, either they're going to lie to me and say they don't know Maggie, even though they have to walk by her nurse stand every morning on the way to work, which is absurd, or they have to be like, well, yeah, I know Maggie. She's very nice. Okay, well then, and you've seen other employees report to Maggie that they, cut their fingers or they got hurt at work, right? Well, yeah. So then why didn't you just go talk to Maggie? Oh, well, I told Francisco, but he didn't do anything. Like, well, that doesn't hold nearly as much weight because there's clearly a chain of knowledge as to how to pursue your benefits and your rights. And in every single case, all you hear by this post-termination claims is, I didn't know how. So if you have an employer that has safety meetings once a month, once a week, and has sign-offs for those safety meetings, that's going to go a long way.
Those workplace injury acknowledgement forms.
Exactly.
Okay.
Just establishing that clearly because it also builds credibility with the court as to the employer that, hey, me employer, I get on the stand, my credibility is being judged by the judge.
That's what this is, huh?
It's
this
all
is
credibility.
A credibility issue, right? So it's as the employer, have you dotted all your I's, crossed your T's? Have you done everything within your power? And at that point, it's the attorney's job, like during deposition, to say like, hey, we did all these things, and then find holes in their story, at which point, like, credibility.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, here, if I could very briefly get into the law, the most frustrating part of this process is the post-termination filing.
Yep.
That is the bread and butter of 80% of injured workers. The post-termination claim. You get fired and you have no money, so you go and you file a work comp claim. Okay. The law has a defense that says if you file a claim after you're terminated, then as long as we can establish that this is the case, then the case should be dismissed. That's what it says on paper.
Which is hilarious. It is really funny that like it is the bulk of these claims and they're not even allowed to happen technically.
The defense is largely meaningless because of the knowledge requirement. You have to prove that the injured worker knew that they had a workers' compensation injury. Now, if you're dealing with something like, hey, I put a nail through my hand, any reasonable person would know that they're injured because they're actively bleeding and they're injured. Okay. With a post-termination claim on a cumulative trauma, all they have to say is, I didn't know that I was injured. And the case law essentially establishes that knowledge is when a doctor tells you that you have an injury. Now, I'm simplifying things here, but largely that comes down to it. So since a doctor never told them before they were terminated that they had an injury, they didn't know they had an injury to report, therefore there's no post-termination defense. So what that means and what the part of the garden that we can touch is as a result is typically when I am deciding whether or not to take a post-termination case to trial, it will largely come down, like you said, it's credibility. The question is, can I get this applicant up on the stand and establish that they are lying about everything? So now the post-termination defense lends a little bit weight to our case. Imagine there's a scale, the idea being the more that we can marshal, we're just putting an extra, 2 ounces here, 3 ounces there, 4 ounces there, and slowly but surely the scale is going to go down. So on that post-termination defense, I do try those defenses, but largely those cases that I'm doing it in are where I know I have an applicant who has no credibility. And I will be able to put them on the stand and a judge will be like, look, yeah, they didn't see a doctor. Yeah, nobody told them that they had, a cumulative trauma before they were terminated. But at the same time, this person lied about these work procedures. This person lied about what their job duties were. This person lied about having prior claims. So these are the things that I'm looking into.
Seeing a pattern.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like if I can basically prove that this guy's full of shit and I can get the judge to agree with that, then that's how I'm going to win the case. And that's largely how you win a post-term. Now,
do those typically end in a nominal settlement, or are those just completely thrown out, like a case is thrown out? Like those circumstances where...
Yeah, so that's called a take nothing. And a take nothing case is where the judge says, yeah, the applicant has no credibility. No, the case is closed. Now, what will often happen is you don't know how any judge is going to rule. So what Sean and I do is we do things like we run an ISO claim search. So we're going to be looking through every single claim this person has ever filed with any insurance company. This is commercial liability. This is personal injury, car accidents, workers' compensation claims. Great. And then we get a record subpoenas on all those things. We're going to courts and we're subpoenaing those court records. If we know that they have a concurrent or a subsequent employer, I'm going to subpoena that subsequent employer, try to get job descriptions. Then we'll probably be enlisting the help of an investigator to come take witness statements from the employer. That way we know what everyone is going to say beforehand. And then in the deposition, once again, very much an art form, Sean and I generally take a nice guy approach. The reason being, if you take a fire and brimstone approach with an injured worker and you start accusing them of things at a deposition, they're just going to clam up. And throughout the course of any workers' compensation case, the injured worker is talking to endless doctors. And I'm not there, and the other attorneys aren't there, and nobody is there. So essentially, I want to know what he's going to say to everybody else. So we take a nice guy approach and just try to hand him as much rope to hang himself as possible. And then when it comes time to trial, that's when we pull the noose.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Well, I'm excited to continue working with you, dude. That is like a very gangster mentality of like, hey, we're just going to let some line out, see where this goes. You're going to trip a bunch. And then when the time comes, like, make the case.
I'm just so glad you were this excited about me hanging people.
I love it, dude. Very, very excited about it. Well, sweet, Leor. I'm very thankful that we're going to continue to work together. Obviously, when people move jobs or start something else, a lot of times it isn't just like doing the same thing. They'll do something maybe adjacent or completely out of what they're doing for a living. So it's really cool that we're going to continue to strengthen this partnership, and I'm stoked, man. So thank you for coming by today. I really appreciate it, and yeah, let's go have fun tonight.
Hell yeah.
I love it. Thanks, dude.
Thanks, John.